Welcome, everyone, to American Prairie's National Discovery Center and the Clyde Aspavig Event Center. Today's a very special day when we finally get to introduce our new exhibit, the Sherry Girton and Scott Waldy Black-Footed Ferret exhibit to the people of Lewistown and Montana. So I'm sure most of you have had a chance to view the exhibit, meet the endangered species that will make Lewistown his home. The ferret you saw is on loan from the National Black-Footed Ferret Conservation Center in Colorado, near Carr, Colorado. The Ferret Center is operated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Its mission of the Ferret Center is to operate as a breeding center for black-footed ferrets that will be hopefully reintroduced into the wild. Currently, there are between 600 and 1,000 black-footed ferrets alive today, according to the Ferret Center. And that includes at breeding centers and in the wild combined, so there aren't very many. And of that number, around 280 are currently at the Ferret Conservation Center in Colorado, the largest ferret captive breeding center or facility in existence. So it's a miracle that we can even view a live black-footed ferret. The species once blanketed the American West, living in prairie dog towns. There we go, and that's the Ferret Center. I'm sorry. I should have been clicking. But anyway, like I said, the species once blanketed the American West, living in prairie dog towns where they preyed upon their host. A ferret eats one prairie dog every 3 days. So with the settlement of the West and the purposeful eradication of prairie dogs, black-footed ferrets lost their main food source. So a non-native disease that arrived around 1900, sylvatic plague, also killed what was left of the already dwindling prairie dog and ferret populations. So by 1979, black-footed ferrets were believed to be extinct. So unfortunately for the species, in 1981, a ranch dog belonging to John and Lucille Hogg killed a ferret on the ranch near Meeteetse, Wyoming, which is just south of Cody. Biologists sent to investigate the incident quickly located the planet's last colony of approximately 130 black-footed ferrets on the neighboring Pitchfork Ranch, as well as on the Hogg Ranch and a few others. So excited biologists from around the world swarmed Meeteetse, where they set up shop, put tents in everybody's yards, and studied the ferrets. So, but a few years later, sylvatic plague did set in, and the ferret and prairie dog populations crashed up there. So, desperate to save the species from extinction, the biologists captured the last 18 ferrets left alive. So it went from 130 to 18 because of sylvatic plague. And with them, they began a captive breeding program. And after a couple of years of early struggles, the breeding program finally saw some success, although many challenges still remain. So, again, ferrets are bred at the Ferret Center in Colorado with the goal of being released into the wild. Before that happens, however, ferrets are placed into 40 by 40 foot preconditioning pens. These pens are located smack dab right on top of a massive prairie dog town. And that's about a half hour north of Fort Collins, officially near Carr or Wellington, Colorado, just off of I-25. So once in the pens, the ferrets are observed to see if they can catch and kill a prairie dog. If they can do this, they are candidates to be released into the wild. If they can't, then they can't be released, or they would just starve. A small number of those that cannot catch and kill a prairie dog become ambassador ferrets, like the one we have. Kimberly Fraser, outreach specialist at the Ferret Center, decides which select organizations are candidates to host a live black-footed ferret. Most of those that are approved are zoos, such as the Phoenix Zoo, National Zoo at the Smithsonian, Toronto Zoo, Louisville Zoo, Zoological Garden. Currently, though, outside of 6 breeding centers, which includes the Ferret Center in Colorado, there are only 21 facilities housing a black-footed ferret. Of those 21, only about 5, I think there are 5 right now, organizations are not zoos. American Prairie is one of those 5 that are not the zoos that still have an ambassador ferret. So ferret hosts are not chosen lightly. like us. The organization must go through a rigorous process of designing and creating a habitat and educational exhibit that meets the very high standards of the Ferret Center and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So host organizations are required to work closely with Kimberly Frazier from the Ferret Center and staff to make sure everything serves the best interests of the ferret, and that the ferret will be utilized for educational purposes and to raise awareness of the species and its importance in the ecosystem. So our exhibit was designed by a team of very talented people from Split Rock Studios, which is located in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. It's a suburb of Minneapolis. And we think they did a great job. In fact, to quote Kimberly Frazier, American Prairie's live black-footed ferret exhibit is the best in North America. Not to brag, but we think it's pretty cool. So, by the way, be sure to check out our 24/7 ferret cam. You can go to americanprairie.org and you can check on our ferret. If you can't sleep at night, just tune in and see what he's doing. Usually he's up on top, during the evening, because it's nocturnal. So you'll see more activity then. He likes to sleep in the cereal box that's up on top now, but you can see him, come out there too and do some things and just run around. But okay, I want to thank Split Rock Studios for the job they did, but also the members of our staff and community who helped with various aspects of this project, from fact-checking and editing text to identifying the correct bee and bat species to show and to providing images for interpretive panels. Many people helped. Some, like Spencer and Emma, helped me paint, and many are helping with the daily care and maintenance of the ferret. I appreciate them all for helping with that. It's not easy. More help has come from the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute, which is adding 2 panels soon to our exhibit telling about their research with prairie dogs on American prairie properties. So I thank Jesse Bolaris with the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute for his efforts in this process. And we look forward to adding his panels probably within the next week or two. They're in the process of printing those off, and they're going to be on that blank wall, at least temporarily, probably for maybe a half a year until we get some other interactive up on that wall. But we're happy to have that information up there, and it's real exciting. Anyway, I do want to single out one person who went above and beyond to complete this project, and that's American Prairie's Travis Flock. So that's Travis up on the ladder. Yeah! Woo! Yay! Travis spent a number of weekends and evenings doing the major sheetrock work on the walls, cutting out the entrances to the exhibit, and a host of other really difficult and specialized tasks in preparation for the eventual installation of the exhibit by the Split Rock team. So thanks to Travis. Thank you, Travis, for doing that. Let's get to our first speaker, and I want to introduce Dr. Daniel Kinka, who is the Director of Rewilding for American Prairie. He leads our efforts to restore wildlife and habitat and promote human-wildlife coexistence. He also directs science and monitoring at American Prairie, serving as liaison to researchers, agencies, and partner organizations. He holds a Ph.D. in ecology from Utah State University. So let's welcome Danny.
Thank you all for coming. There is a funny thing about the landscape that we live in, the Great Plains. From a distance, it looks empty. A big, beige nothing. You drive through on I-90 or 191 and think, well, there's a whole lot of nothing out there. At least I did when I first moved out west. But if you stop, you step out of your vehicle, you wait, give it a minute. A ferruginous hawk wheels overhead. A coyote slips through the sage. Prairie dogs whistle warnings from their burrows. The grass itself seems to breathe. This is not nothing. It's everything. And everything here is connected by some of the oldest stories there are. Predator and prey, life and death, balance, reciprocity, interconnection. And at the center of that story, hidden underground, sleeps one of the rarest creatures in North America, the black-footed ferret. And there was a time not long ago when this animal was gone, vanished, declared extinct. The last known ferret died in a lab in 1979, and with it the final pulse of a wild lineage that had haunted prairie dogs and imaginations on these grasslands for thousands of years. But then, like a ghost, They came back. One night in 1981, as David shared, a Wyoming ranch dog named Shep trotted home with something in his mouth. A limp, masked little weasel, not unlike a chew toy, not unlike a miracle. That dog, bless his canine curiosity, had found what no one else could, the last living colony of black-footed ferrets on Earth, clinging to survival near Matchett, Wyoming. That's where the second chapter of this story begins, not in a lab or a government office, but on the land, with the people who worked it. Ranchers, biologists, neighbors, stubbornly unkillable prairie dogs, and of course, the ferret itself, who refused to let imminent extinction have the last word. And since then, every ferret alive today, every one you'll ever see, including the one in the other room there, traces its bloodline to that tiny Wyoming colony, to a few dozen survivors, to the stubbornness of people and wildlife who said, "We're not done yet." But to really understand the ferret story, you have to understand its world, the prairie dog town. Prairie dogs are not just rodents in holes, they are the civil engineers of the Great Plains and some of nature's greatest rewilders. Their burrows breathe life into the soil, letting air and water reach deep into the earth. Their digging stirs up nutrients and provides homes for awkward diggers like burrowing owls, prairie rattlesnakes, and tiger salamanders. Their clipping of grasses creates a mosaic of plant heights and types that feeds pronghorn and bison and provides nesting habitats for mountain plovers. A thriving prairie dog town hums with diversity. Eagles above, badgers below, beetles, larks, and foxes in between. It is the prairie's beating heart. And somewhere in that labyrinth, moving like a shadow through those tunnels, is the black-footed ferret, a carnivore so specialized that it lives almost entirely inside another species' world. 90% of a ferret's diet is prairie dogs. They hunt them in their own burrows, sleep in the same chambers, raise their kits in the same soil. Without prairie dogs, there are no ferrets, and ferrets require a lot of prairie dogs. So when the prairie dog towns fall silent, when they're poisoned, paved over, or struck by plague, the ferret's light goes out too. In a world where prairie dogs occupy 2% or less of their historic range, where, oh where, is a wild ferret to make her home? That's why the animal is more than just a rare predator. It is a symbol, a proxy for the health of that unsung grassland keystone, the prairie dog, and thus the biodiversity and resilience of the plains themselves. If the ferret thrives, it means the prairie dog thrives. And when the prairie dog thrives, the grassland itself begins to breathe again. But let's be honest. Bringing a species back from the dead isn't neat or easy. It's messy. It's complicated. It's the kind of work that requires equal parts stubbornness, science, and a sheer faith, frankly, in the absurd. Ferrets don't make it easy on us. They're nocturnal. They are solitary. They are secretive. They eat one thing, and wouldn't you know it, it's in shockingly short supply. They're finicky about habitat, about timing, about nearly everything. In short, if you were to design a species for extinction, you might come up with something close to a black-footed ferret. And yet, here they are. And not just in a glass box down the hall. 40 years later, there are a few hundred in the wild, some right here in central Montana up on Fort Belknap, living, hunting, breeding, doing ferret things. Not enough to rest easy, not even close, but enough to prove that wildness can find its way back if we give it the slimmest chance. That's why we're celebrating today. Not the end of the story, but something closer to the middle. Not victory, but persistence. The ferret isn't the first exile to return to the plains. A century ago, it was the bison, the great shaggy monarch of the prairie, who stood on the same brink for tens of millions to just a few hundred survivors, shot for hides and trophies, and to starve out the people who lived alongside them. But the bison had an ace in the hole: size and spectacle. They are thunder made flesh. They make the ground shake when they move. When they came back, people noticed. They had friends in high places, presidents, philanthropists, the national parks. They also have human relatives who remember what the bison has always done for them and the importance of community. And thank God for that, because their return cracked open the door for everything else in rewilding. But the black-footed ferret, the ferret is the other side of that coin. It doesn't thunder. It barely whispers. It slips between blades of grass and goes unseen by nearly everyone, including many unsuspecting prairie dogs. It doesn't command attention. It requires devotion, quiet, patient, relentless, late-night, caffeine-fueled devotion. In a way, the bison is the comeback story we already know. Big, bold, audacious, triumphant. The ferret is the one that we are still writing, with too little ink and not enough paper. The one that asks, can we save something just because it belongs? Even if it doesn't feed us, make itself accessible to us, or even serve much of an ecological role insofar as we can tell. Not a game animal, not a trophy, not a food source, not a keystone, just a reclusive, nocturnal neighbor. If the bison tells us that large landscapes can heal, that there can be some hope for conservation, that rewilding is possible, and both the privilege and the duty of us two-leggeds, the ferret tells us that those healed landscapes must be complete, from the largest grazer to the pickiest predator, if we want to preserve our prairie community. That's the moral heart of the ferret story. It's not about nostalgia or guilt or even biodiversity in the abstract. It's about relationship, about what we owe the wild lives that share the land with us. The black-footed ferret reminds us that the health of a place isn't measured by its productivity, but by its complexity. That the worth of a landscape isn't in how much we can take from it, but in how much life it can hold and the resilience that that affords. That the measure of our success as a society might just be whether the smallest predator on the plains still has a place to hunt, and whether the prairie dog towns beneath our feet are still alive and barking. Because the prairie dog's chatter is more than just noise. It is language. It's the scuttlebutt, the nightly news, the bedtime stories of the prairie, and every ferret that slips through those unseen and undreamt of tunnels is proof that the language of the grasslands has not been forgotten. When I talk about rewilding, folks sometimes ask, why here? Why the prairie? Why rangelands? And I tell them, this is where the frontier began, and this is where we have a chance to begin again. The original frontier was unglaciated, boundless, bountiful, and beautiful, where Homo sapiens made their homes in a new continent, embedded themselves in the ecologies and lifeways of the plains, and defined human ecology and natural reciprocity. The old frontier, the Wild West, included a lot of conquest and extraction and dominion, but it also included would-be cowboys like Charles Marion Russell, who could exclaim with earnestness unique to his ilk, "Guard, protect, and cherish your land, for there is no afterlife for a place that started out as heaven." After all, what is a cowboy except another rare endemic of the plains? The new frontier, the one we're standing in now, is about community and coexistence, resilience and restoration. It's about realizing that our lives and our lifeways are tied to the grass and the wind and the creatures that share our space, even the ones most people will never see. It's about coming to find that restored and thriving communities of people, of wildlife, of nature, are the keystone of economic, ecological, and sociological resilience. The black-footed ferret, for all its secrecy, is teaching us how to live on this land again, not as conquerors, but as neighbors, teaching us that what's missing isn't big sky and open space, but robust communities of wildlife and people. That, in the words of Chris Tompkins, landscape without wildlife is just scenery. And so, neighbors, here's the challenge. The ferret's comeback isn't guaranteed. It's frankly not even expected at this point. It's fragile. It is costly. And it is ongoing. There are diseases that threaten them, prairie dog declines that undermine them, and the simple fact that the wild is still shrinking. The frontier is not inherently eternal, but it can be. If we save the black-footed ferret from extinction, found a way to propagate that unlikely creature and reintroduced it to its home in the wild, we can do it again, and again, and again, if necessary. Because the story of the prairie, like all great stories, is not one of loss, but of return. Each of us plays a part, whether you work the land, teach in town, raise your kids to know what a prairie dog looks like, or just take a walk and notice the sound of meadowlarks in the spring. You're part of the larger act of rewilding. You are part of giving the ferret, the bison, the prairie dog, and the prairie itself another chapter. And right here in this building, the National Discovery Center, we have a prologue to that story in fur and bone. I have seen scientists, quietly, headlamp clad, open the doors of small plastic boxes full of shredded newspaper and reintroduce ferrets to their ancestral homes on the prairie. And in the other room, inside the exhibit, I hear the echo and reverberations of that act of hope. The black-footed ferret in this building isn't an exhibit. He's an emissary of the wild, a masked envoy from the underground world that most of us will never see, a herald of the prairie dog. You might ask, why does a rewilding organization keep a captive animal? Good question. Well, it's not a consolation prize. It's a conversation starter. It's a bridge between people and the wild, between curiosity and commitment. For every child who presses their face to the glass and watches him dart through his tunnel, a little grass seed is planted. A question begins to form. Where do they live? What do they eat? Why are they rare? What can we do to help them? And that curiosity is the first step towards stewardship, especially for such a cryptic little marauder. Because you can't care about what you don't know, and you won't protect what you've never met. Mother Teresa said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. Well, may I reintroduce you to your long-lost relative. The ferret, your ferret, is a teacher and a reminder. A teacher because he tells the story of recovery better than any brochure or biologist ever could, although I suspect Randy can give him a run for his money. And a reminder because his home here in Lewistown exists precisely so that his relatives might one day thrive in wild country without fences or glass walls. His presence here means that people of central Montana, students, teachers, ranchers, visitors, get to know one of America's rarest animals not as an abstract idea, but as kin. He represents the connection between the frontier that was and the frontier that will be again. He's not here instead of wildness. He's here for it. So, as you explore the exhibit today, hear from other speakers who I am very proud and humbled to share this stage with today, eat a cookie shaped like a ferret, or watch the documentary later this afternoon, please remember this. You are living through one of the most hopeful experiments in restoration our species has ever attempted. It's not happening in far-off jungles or in coral reefs. It's happening right here, in the grass beneath our feet. And when you leave today, after you've met our sprightly little diplomat, after you've seen his bright masked eyes and restless energy, I hope you carry that spark of the wild home with you. And when you leave today, the prairie may seem quiet, but it's humming with comeback stories. The bison, the beaver, the prairie dog, the grizzly bear, the swift fox, and now, again and again, the black-footed ferret. They are the pulse returning to the patient. They are the cowboy waiting for the return of a wilder frontier. They are the proof that it is not too late. And the prairie remembers. Thank you.
Randy Matchett, our next speaker, is a wildlife biologist for the Charles Russell National Wildlife Refuge. His work trying to save the black-footed ferrets and prairie dogs has gone on for decades, and Randy is still hard at work in this valiant endeavor. So Randy lives in Lewistown, I believe, and is a rock star in the ferret conservation world. So let's give him a big hand.
Well, thanks for having me, David. Can you hear me all right? I've been a biologist at CMR now for 39 years. I managed a black-footed ferret population at UL Bend in southern Phillips County for 25 years. In 2017, we had close to 30 animals in the fall, and that was the fourth largest wild population at the time. If you remember, 2017 was a bad drought, followed by an extensive winter, and by spring, we only had 8. And plague had taken out 70% of 1,800 acres of prairie dogs. And that was the last time we had ferrets there, but they lasted for 25 years. I've spent a long time working with colleagues with USGS on plague and ways to mitigate plague, and that's when I'm going to kind of dive deep in on that, because plague is the biggest biological challenge to ferret recovery. The main way we control plague or try to prevent plague is to kill fleas. Fleas vector the bacteria that causes plague. This is the same plague that caused Black Death and killed half of Europe back in the 1300s. So with dusting with deltamethrin, it's a broad-spectrum insecticide. We've done this for over 20 years. You need to squirt 4 to 6 grams of this dust down every single burrow with special dusting machines. Because you have to go to every burrow, the treatment rate depends on burrow density, but it's usually around 2 to 2.5 acres per hour that one person can treat. And the cost for contractors to do this generally runs $30 to $35 an acre. The next thing that we spend a lot of time working on is the National Wildlife Health Center in Madison, Wisconsin with USGS developed a vaccine against plague for prairie dogs. And she challenged prairie dogs in the lab, and it seemed to be fairly protective in a laboratory situation. So we were involved at UL Bend again. We were one of 12 study sites in 7 states where we evaluated the effectiveness of the vaccine in the wild. The way the experiments were done is we paired colonies, and one got a placebo bait and the other one got a vaccine bait, and all of us in the field were blind as to which was which. We trapped prairie dogs, and this is what we're doing here, anesthetize them and then mark them. And so this was our first year in 2013, and these are all volunteers that did this field work. And so we trap prairie dogs, bring them to a shady spot with a canopy, and then hook them up to a vaporizer with oxygen and isoflurane and anesthetize them. So these are going to sleep in those little plastic chambers. And then once they're asleep, we dump them into a tub like that. We collect the fleas off them because the isoflurane also puts the fleas to sleep. We collect those and test them for plague. The red baits that we put out have a biomarker in them called rhodamine B. And so you can pluck hair and whiskers, and if they ate a bait, those fluorescent pink and red under a fluorescent microscope, so we can actually for sure be very positive which prairie dogs ate a bait and which ones didn't. Putting these baits out at 50 baits per acre, we were getting roughly 80% of the prairie dogs found and ate at least one bait. So we were pretty happy with that rate. So once they're anesthetized, we record sex, age, and weight. They get 2 ear tags, a pit tag like used in the pet and livestock industry, and a blood sample. And so these are all volunteer college kids that spent 3 months at UL Bend doing this. So back when I was talking about the UL Bend ferret population we had that died out, it was treated for 2 full years with this plague vaccine prior to plague hitting it and wiping it out. And so writing up that 5 years worth of research, we had 4 plot pairs, a placebo combined with an adjacent vaccine. We anesthetized and marked almost 2,300 prairie dogs on those 4 pairs of plots. The size plots were 30 to 40 acres each. And then they were caught over 7,000 times, and that's what we do in having that kind of data to where we can actually calculate what survival rates are. In the end, prairie dogs living on the vaccine plots had 5% lower survival than the placebo plots, which really surprised us. And then the fact that I treated all the acres that the ferrets were on with the 4th largest wild population at the time, and it wiped it out. The other thing we were learning at about the same time was with the deltamethrin dust, which worked really, really well. But after 4, 5, 6 years of doing it annually, like many insecticides, fleas developed resistance. So we started looking for other active ingredients to try and replace or rotate with delta dust, but it's still really labor intensive and expensive. A company just down the road from the Ferret Center in Colorado took and put fipronil on wheat kernels, fipronil grain. Fipronil is the active ingredient in frontline spray that's been used for decades on dogs and cats to control fleas and ticks. So the way that this stuff works is it's systemic. The prairie dog eats the fipronil-laced bait. An adult flea takes a blood meal from the prairie dog, and then it kills the flea. But you still have to go to every burrow and put 1/4 to 1/2 cup at each burrow for the prairie dog to find and eat it. It's faster than dusting, but the cost overall is about the same. So one thing that worked really, really well is making the bait pellets and mass producing them with the thing in the lower right-hand corner. That video is called a boilie roller. I found it in 2016 to mass produce the vaccine baits. Bought the first one delivered for $2,500 from Lithuania. And its original purpose is to make carp fishing bait, because carp fishing is a big deal in Europe. And so we adapted it to mass produce these bait pellets. So we have the triple shooter you saw in the video where we can treat pretty fast. We got the boilie roller to make a bait pellet that prairie dogs will eat so we can deliver it. And then I just basically substituted fipronil for the vaccine. And so in doing these, we can put them out on transects, so it goes a lot faster. So then the way we evaluated it was, this is about a 20-acre prairie dog town, and we trapped and combed 122 prairie dogs for fleas. And if you're going to do a flea control study, it's nice to start out with a whole bunch of fleas. So on the north side, we caught 764 fleas and about 700 on the south side. So we had a lot of fleas on prairie dogs on this colony. So this is pre-treatment. The green area on the north is what I picked to treat. And so every one of those dots is where a triple shooter, which I'll talk about when I'm done with the slideshow, dropped one bait straight down, shot one to the right, and shot one to the left 30 feet. And that's about 10 acres, and it took me 8 minutes to treat it and put those baits out. So that's pretty fast. We average 40 to 50 acres an hour, depending on the terrain, and I'll talk about the triple shooters more. So then we came back periodically and trapped and combed prairie dogs for fleas again. And so all the blue dots on the treated site are 0 fleas per prairie dog. This is over the course of 1 to 3 months, 9 to 12, and 12 to 2 years later from a single treatment. And so here on the left is the Montana. So you can see the dark bar is the Fitbit treated site, and the other one is the non-treated site. So we had lots of fleas to start out. When we went and combed again at 1 to 3 months, still lots of fleas on the non-treated, but 0 fleas on the Fitbit treated site. At 12 months, the same thing. We didn't have any fleas on the treated site. At 2 years post-single treatment, fleas were starting to come back, but they were still significantly lower on the treated site. We had another test down in Arizona, real similar in that 1 to 2 months after treatment, we started out with a lot of fleas. They couldn't find any. At a year later, still significantly reduced, but at 2 years later, fleas had come back. The fipronil in the prairie dog, we've done some captive feeding studies, and it only lasts 30 to 45 days. And so that does a good knockdown first of the adult fleas, but fleas lay their eggs down in prairie dog burrows and nesting chambers, and that's where the larvae hatch. And a colleague down in Fort Collins exposed flea larvae at the Center for Disease Control. They had a captive flea population there. Exposed those larvae to feces from prairie dogs that had eaten fipronil bait. And when those eggs hatch into larvae, and they just contacted one of those fipronil-laced pellets, 58% of them died. And larvae eat a lot of organic matter too before they pupate, and it killed 93% of those. These fipronil residues have a half-life of up to 7 months. So you got so much, 7 months later you have half of that, and it just keeps halving every 7 months. And so those residues persist a long, long time down in those tunnel systems and prairie dog nesting chambers, and that's where we think we're getting such long-term control. And so Fitbit treatments with the triple shooters are a lot faster because you can just go on transects. The triple shooters work. I'll talk about them more here in a minute. But we average 40 to 50 acres an hour, and making the Fitbits, including the labor for hiring technicians to make them, our cost is down to $5. So it's going to be a game changer for flea control and plague control on dog towns. In 2023, we started scaling up. Those were some experiments we started in 3 states and Saskatchewan up at Grasslands National Park. We expanded in 2024 to almost 5,000 acres. In this past summer, we treated a little over 6,600. 500 of that was on American Prairie. I still have one big challenge in that you can imagine the violent shaking these pellets get in the hopper on the ATV bouncing across the prairie, and I still haven't figured out how to keep them from breaking. And when they break, a small piece will get in with a hole one in the triple shooter tubes, and it jams. And so then you have to stop, clear it, and that slows you down. And that's my job this winter, is to try and figure out how to keep them from breaking and that jamming issue. So it comes and goes. It's kind of random, and I've been working with a lot of formulation chemists and food science people. Fitbits are made with all food grade ingredients. They're like 3 different kinds of flour: vital wheat gluten, xanthan gum, peanut butter, molasses. That's the part that's really frustrating me, because it slows you down. If they don't break, you can treat up to 100 acres an hour, so it goes a lot faster. And I call that the end.
As you've heard this afternoon, there aren't a lot of black-footed ferrets out there. We don't think there are any on the CMR these days. We don't think there are any at American Prairie. But you actually don't have to go very far to find them, because there is a sustaining, thriving community of those ferrets in the vast Snake Butte buffalo pasture on the Fort Belknap Reservation, home of the Aaniiih and Nakoda people. And that's pretty awesome. And what's also pretty awesome is that the students at Aaniiih Nakoda College's ecology program get to research and monitor and trap and spotlight and interact with those ferrets, which is an extraordinary learning opportunity, not only for the students, but for all of us. And so we asked them to come and just tell us a little bit today about what it's like to get to work with these animals, about the research that they do, and the really, really special opportunities that they've had to do hands-on work with this incredibly rare and endangered animal. And if you spent time in the exhibit so far today, these faces might look familiar. So these guys are in one of the photographs in the Black-footed Ferret exhibit that talks a little bit about the work that tribal communities have done, in particular, to bring ferrets back to their homelands and to restore ferrets to an ecosystem where you may also find, as you would at Fort Belknap, buffalo and restored swift fox and huge prairie dog towns, living alongside people who are working to protect them. So we're really lucky to have Terry Harper and her students here today to talk about that work. So without any further delay, here they are.
Hello, everyone. My name is Terry Harper, and I'm the program coordinator for the Itanan Tatanka Research Education Center at Aaniiih Nakoda College. This is my 4th year being part of that program, and one of my very first opportunities was to be able to go out and help assist our Fort Belknap Fish and Wildlife, Fish and Game, and WWF, as well as Defenders and our Smithsonian partners on spotlighting a ferret. The only ferret I ever knew was my 4-H kid had a ferret, and it wasn't the same. So definitely different. However, so that brings us to now. And some of the things that we've been able to do is we do a lot of field work, and it is extenuating. I mean, we're there 8 hours, 9 hours in the evening. We go at 10 p.m. We're done at 6 or 7 in the morning. The students put in the full 8 hours. Sometimes it's cold. Sometimes it's really windy. It can be boring for the first probably couple hours, but then they get really active. So I'm going to let the students here kind of talk about some of the pictures that you're going to see, and they can explain some of the things you do that we're doing. One of the cool things about Fort Belknap is we have 23,000 acres in our Snake Butte pasture. 3,000 of those acres are designated prime habitat for black-footed ferrets. We've been able to reintroduce them in 1994. There was a small outbreak of plague, and like Randy said in his talk before, it doesn't take long to wipe them out. And so in 1994, that reintroduction did not quite go as we planned. However, in 2013, they reintroduced 36 ferrets, and those ferrets that they reintroduced then are what we are seeing, their offspring, their relations now. And so this year was really an active year. I think these boys will tell you. They have a really unique story to talk about with the picture that is housed in this building. I think Chantry wrote his will that day. And I think these boys will tell you that this is actually probably one of the funnest things they get to do. They do get to do a lot of interaction with all different wildlife, the swift fox, the bison, grassland birds, you name it. But the ferret work is probably something we kind of hold near and dear our heart. We don't conduct a lot of research. We are pretty much support staff. We're like the boots on the ground. However, the boys can really tell you kind of what's going on. So I'm going to let them tell you who they are and what they do and what their year of school is. And he's scared, so he doesn't want to leave. So he's going to go first.
Hello, everybody. My name's Colton Work. I'm an ecology major student at Aaniiih, Nakoda College. I've been in the water buffalo center for about 3 years now. And some of the work that we do for black-footed ferrets is kind of like we all have projects. So some of the students, we get to do that. Like we have senior projects and everything on them.
Hello, everybody. My name is Josiah Longfox, and I'm also majoring in ecology here at ANC. I'll be graduating this spring with my bachelor's in ecology. And I've also been a part of the Buffalo program for maybe as long as Colton, maybe not as long. But the ferrets are probably one of the funnest things we get to do besides help run the buffalo and things like that. And the first night I went to go do ferrets, it's like an 8-hour shift. They told me to rest up and take a nap, so I did. And I went out for that 8-hour shift. I didn't bring anything to eat. 8 hours from 11 to 6, no dinner. When we got done, I went straight to the gas station for some sandwiches, crushed them, and I passed out.
I'm Chantry Jorgensen. I'm also an ecology major, but I'll be graduating this spring with my associates in environmental science. I guess the story Terry was talking about with that picture in the exhibit, we were releasing one, and then I had to stay there to throw a rat once it got in the hole, and it didn't go down, and it started chasing me, and it like was about to go up my leg, and I started running away, and they're like, "No, don't run!" But so I thought I was gonna get like bit and rabies, but yeah. But yeah, we get to do lots of cool stuff with lots of cool partners. We do the black-footed ferret, the buffalo. I spent this past summer working with David Gordon on burrowing owls at the Matador with the Nature Conservancy, and we do swift fox work too. I'm going to be starting my senior project here soon on the bighorn sheep in the Little Rockies. They haven't been studied since the 70s, so that'll be cool.
Oh, okay. So in this picture, it looks like Chantry's laying out one of the cages that we're using to capture these black-footed ferrets to take them back to the vet trailer that we have set out somewhere else out in the prairie. So it's a long rectangular cage covered with a blanket or whatever. So, and you stick it in the hole, and the ferret will think, because it's covered, that it's still a part of the of his hole, and he'll climb up it and he'll get trapped in there. And before that, go back to that picture, Terry. That orange box down there has like this little black ring that you put on the hole right there by that ferret, and it's a reader. And if that ferret has a little chip in the back of its neck, it will tell us which ferret that is, and we have a little piece of paper, and it'll tell us how many shots or whatever he's had. If he's had both of his shots, we just let him out right there. Then we take him back to the trailer. In that top corner picture, that's a ferret after it's been anesthetized, knocked out, and the vet's giving it its shots and its pit tag in the back of its neck. And then we go and we put them back out. Ferrets kind of smell a little bad. Sometimes you got to put it with you inside the truck.
We're giving them kind of just boosters so they're not susceptible to diseases or the common flu or even COVID, stuff like that. Oh, and the plague too. Plague was the big part too. And with that, we have to wear masks when we're in the truck with them. So we always have to make sure that we're not sick, not giving off sickness towards them.
Oh, and the way we spot these ferrets out on Snake Butte is we just have some wicked spotlights that mount to the window of your truck or whatever your vehicle is, and we just shine all night, and the ferret's eyes will reflect back at us, and they'll be like a really bright green, and we'll know that we got to go over there and set all these traps. And this year, this is like, we've been doing this, me and Colton, Chantry too, for like 3 years. Back in the early days, we'd go like 3 nights and we wouldn't see anything. 3 8-hour shifts, they're just not there. But this year, it was like almost the population's got a little bigger ever since we did that release. And we saw one like almost every night, caught one almost every night too. And I think for the first time, we were able to use all the vaccines that lady brought because we caught enough. That was pretty cool. It's just nice to see that this population is growing. We don't know why that it's working for us out in Fort Belknap and it hasn't worked in other places, but we hope that these other places can see similar success.
So one of the things that they do, they're kind of shy, but they're doing better. We spotlight usually for 2 solid weeks. It's usually for at least 10 days, but since funding was cut, we only were able to do 1 spotlighting, and then we were able to do 2 trappings 3 weeks after each. And so a total from that August to October, we were able to see 44, which is the most that we've ever seen. And there was 18 kits, but 26 adults. And when they talk about giving them their shots, they are giving them a distemper and they're giving them a shot for the plague that we have been talking about. And part of the reason is that chip lets us know if they've had their shots, they need a booster, or if they've never had it, because obviously they're not going to have a chip. And the chip is exactly what goes in your dog or cat that you take to the vet. So that's that's pretty awesome for us to be able to assist. One of the other things that's cool is Snake Butte is a very sacred place for both Aaniiih and Nakoda people. And I think that it's kind of a protection place because I think every one of the students would tell you a story of something seen out there during this 8 hours in the dark. With the buffalo, we've came across buffalo that you spotlight. We've seen coyotes a lot. We've seen porcupines, badgers. Some of the other interesting things is like we use a thermal drone. One of the cool opportunities that the students get as one of our partners is we work with the Smithsonian and WWF, and we do thermal droning usually during our last trapping season, which is in October. And that gives us an opportunity to kind of see when our spotlights miss, because you can only scan so much. And sometimes you might see something and it's a rock, but we're going to go see if that is something or not. A lot of times, if you'll notice, they have that reader, and then they have a reflector so we can see where we're coming back to. It's very important that the students and whoever is doing the ferrets, that they put them back where they are in case it is a young one that needs to go back to their family. The activity that we see over this last year, we were just tremendously. I mean, every day we had a lot of new interns that were able to come out for the first time and really see and trap and be a part of it. But it does get tiring. 3 weeks, the kids actually did every single day. I think they were out there at least 4 hours, even if they wasn't out there an 8-hour shift. So this year's research efforts and the counts really paid off with all the support. So I think that at Fort Belknap, there's just something about Snake Butte that allows the bison to thrive, the swift fox to thrive, because that was one of our reintroduction areas for those animals. So the 3,000 acres, the goal is to have 30 pairs that are able to breed within that 3,000 acres. And so we have partners that are utilizing dusting those burrows for those prairie dogs in that 3,000 acres every year to help us maintain good health for those prairie dogs, for those environment for the black-footed ferrets. When they released the ones they were released, we actually put collars on those so that we can get an understanding of the burrow system, so we can kind of know when we're out there. One of the things that we have to do is we have to plug the exit hole, we hope, and knowing how the burrow system works makes it a lot easier for us to conduct the research and to capture some of those ferrets. And so we work hand in hand with our biologist, who was our first graduate from ANC in our ecology. And through the last 3 years, I think that the students have a really understanding of how important it is. This animal is a family of our weasel, and both tribes have a story that is important with the weasel, that this animal is important for us to bring back. But it is a keystone species, and it is important to our tribal members that they ask these students, because they help release some of those ferrets with the collar, how are those ferrets doing? They're very excited when they see a student. They ask them, can you tell us about the prairie dogs? There's lots of questions about prairie dogs. Sometimes they're not that great, but sometimes they are actually informative. So this is kind of what we've been able to do over the last few years. We're a very unique program. We're NSF funded. We were created by NSF to help support the buffalo, but also help on the reintroduction of all the keystone species. And Fort Belknap has a very unique ecosystem. It's kind of one of those that we've been able to kind of keep kind of close to the vest and not share too much. And we've been able to do some really great research. So yes, thank you for letting us share our story with you. Boys, do you have anything else you want to add?